Hey gang, Pastor Smat here at Rooftop Church with this week's Smattering, thoughts to tide you over if you're not quite ready to come back to church. And I was here on Sunday, I saw the crowds. I know that a lot of you are not quite ready to come back to church, which is fine. Now I'm sure by now you've seen news reports of large crowds gathering at the Ozarks over Memorial Day weekend, got picked up by CNN and other news outlets. Here's a picture of the Ozarkian Bacchanalia. Oh, sorry. Thought I saw my parents in that one. Now, I'm not surprised by this incident. I'm not surprised that the media picked it up. It seems like the sort of thing they'd want us to get all riled up about. And I'm not surprised that it happened. I mean, apparently, after 3 months, people are that desperate for community that they're willing to ignore social distancing guidelines, especially on a beautiful weekend. It was a beautiful weekend, not surprised. But well, I can understand large groups of people wanting to gather in intimate quarters on a holiday weekend. Still strikes me as maybe a bit unwise, maybe even a bit irresponsible. I mean, large crowds of people from around the Midwest gathering in crowded quarters to drink and party with a contagious and deadly virus still being transmitted, and one with no known cure. Not the smartest idea. There seem to be better, safer ways to celebrate Memorial Day weekend, even with smaller groups of loved ones. Now, people will say that it's a free country. We've heard that a lot these days. It's a free country. You know, people don't like having to obey extra rules like wearing face masks or social distancing or not being able to conduct business. And yes, it's a free country, but that doesn't mean we can do whatever we want. It's kind of like what Paul says in the book of Galatians in the New Testament to the church in Galatia. Paul says this. He says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free." It's a free country. You are called to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. You are called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. What Paul is saying here is that Christ died to make us free. Christ freed us from the bonds of the Old Testament law. The Jewish law in the Old Testament, if you know this, was pretty intense. It included laws on just about everything: clothes, food, worship, morality. The Bible says that because of what Jesus did on the cross, we're free from those laws. As Christians, we've been freed from the law's overbearing control of our lives. But that doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want. Christ didn't buy us our freedom on the cross so that we can indulge the flesh, so that we can go to crazy parties and live it up and pick up viruses that we bring back home. Christ freed us from the law so that we can fulfill a greater law, which is to serve each other in love. Now, I know these are complicated times, and everybody's got lots of thoughts and opinions about the best way to respond to the coronavirus. You might disagree with me about whether or not COVID-19 is even that serious of a threat, and I respect that, nor do I mean to speak judgmentally to partygoers at the Ozarks. I mean, I misuse my Christian freedom every day. I'm free from the Old Testament law to have to keep the Sabbath. I don't got to do that anymore, but I use that as an excuse to be a workaholic. I'm free from the Old Testament law of tithing. I don't got to tithe anymore, and I use that freedom to skimp on my giving sometimes. I misuse my Christian freedom all the time, so who am I to judge partygoers at the Ozarks? Who are you to judge partygoers at the Ozarks? Same for you. I mean, whether you're an American, whether you're a Christian, you misuse your freedom too. Just because you're free to eat whatever you want doesn't mean you should, but you do. Just because you're free to get divorced doesn't mean you should, but you do. Just because you're free to lie around the house all day doesn't mean you should, but you do. So humility is required from all of us. We are all absolute total hypocrites. But the point still holds, especially for followers of Jesus. By the death of Christ, we have been freed from having to obey a set of laws we could never really obey anyway. But let's not abuse our freedom. Christ died so that we can serve. The men and women whose deaths we celebrated on Memorial Day, they did not die so that we can live it up on the weekends. They died so that we can follow their example and serve humanity. So today, you're free to do whatever you want to do. Really, you are. You're free to do whatever you want to do, within reason, of course. It's a free country, and if you're a follower of Jesus, you've been freed from the law. But you are freed from the chains of the law so that we can honor God by serving each other with the love of Jesus Christ. If you can do that while partying it up at the Ozarks, go with God, have a good time. If you can't, find a better way to serve. That's your smattering for the week. We hope to see you Sunday. If you're up for it, we're open for worship, but we do have social distancing guidelines that we are choosing to honor. You can read about those and pre-register for our service at rooftop.org/virus. This is Pastor Smat, smiting out.